Yes, people are transphobic, but their transphobia is a product of their inability to accept people stepping outside of established ideas and boundaries and boxes. And if you'll just walk with me for a moment on this rant about how people in general cast hate on things that they can't understand, or people who don't limit themselves, I will explain this phenomenon to you. So if we can just cast away this ideal that hate for the sake of hate exists, it's gonna make racism, gender oppression, every kind of ism and phobic makes sense, because I really just want us to understand this as a high level topic so that everything underneath it, bigotry, makes more sense. Not more sense as in it'll be normalized, but like it'll click for you why you can't have a logical conversation with these people and their minds be changed. You can't. It's so deep in them. It's so rooted in them, because to them, it's not about gender. It's not about race. It's not about orientation. It's not about any of that to them. It's about this inability to accept people stepping outside of boxes. That's why these exact same people that exhibit this kind of bigotry, they don't understand why people of different generations don't want to work for certain wages, and why certain things don't make sense to us, or having children that we can't afford, or buying houses we can't afford. You know, like it's a reason why these same people struggle with all of these very similar ideas. And what we're going to talk about today is that root. Okay, all right, let's go.
Used to wear Stockholm, now I prefer alone. I'd rather do this on my own than be disrespected and feel so neglected. I'm ready to go.
The beauty of human beings is that we're so efficient at surviving that we have encoded the information that has helped us survive, or our ancestors have encoded that information that helps us survive into DNA, so that it is trickled down, and so that we have traits, instincts, behaviors, thoughts, ideas, and feelings that are a product of how do we keep surviving as a species. First and foremost, most of the things that we call normal, or that we normalize, or we look for as homogeny within a group or community, it exists because psychologically, or at least on a biological level, we just want to survive.
Typically, when we see hypergroup identification within a community, it usually is associated with a group that has experienced systematic oppression in some capacity. The Black community is a really good example of this. So you might see people saying, that's not Black, or Black people don't do this, or you're not Black enough, and that sucks, I hate that, we should not be doing that, Black is not a monolith. But we can draw a line between that behavior and the behavior and tactics that Black people had to use to survive post-Civil War and pre-Civil War, to be honest. Being a part of a group or community is a form of safety. But to benefit from the protection of existing within a group, there has to be some level of homogenous behavior. This is what we do to stay safe.
But to make that ideal a little more modern, there are also ideas perpetuated consciously throughout society that send signals about here's how to survive. And so the main point is, here is how you assimilate into a group, and having a group means survival, which makes sense. Like, it's easier to survive and have more resources when you are a part of a system, whether it's a family, a community, or group. And so when we have these ideas of self called identity, so for survival's sake, we establish identity groups, people who are like us. And these groups exist based on gender, race, education level, your geography, where you live, your neighborhood. You have so many identity groups. We talked about it a little bit on Instagram.
Community versus friendships. Friends are people that you choose to build intimacy with based on shared values. Your hardships, your religion, your principles of morality, whatever. You have to share values with your friend. Community is not about the individual. It's about the fact that you share proximity or a core goal. Like, people you go to school with are in your community. So if somebody says something derogative about a fellow alumni, you might defend them because they're part of your community. But if they weren't a part of your community, you wouldn't care about them. We often become friends with people we share a community with, but community and friendships are not inherently the same thing. Does that make sense?
There's so many communities that you already exist within. You just need to get active, and you need to see where your people gather. Like, you don't have to have a religion to have community. You don't have to only have community within your immediate neighbors. Like, just by existing, you belong to a bunch of identity groups who are communities. You just got to figure that out. But that said, each identity group has an ideal of how they believe that their groups should behave within society. And a lot of times it feels like people are projecting their stuff onto us, but the truth is they don't see us as separate identity groups. Does that makes sense. A good example is the argument that people have about pro-life versus choice. And what do we always say? Like, it's your body, do what you want with your body. Why do you need to regulate someone else's? Well, it's because they have made a choice about what they think they should do with their body based on an identity group that they believe they belong to, and they believe you belong to it as well. Even if the identity group is just American citizen. I'm an American, you're an American, and as an American, I'm pro-life. And so since you are also an American, my expectation is that, or you are also a woman, or you are also a whatever it is. And so like there's so many trickle downs of high level groups that we get caught up in when we start having arguments. In a perfect world, we would understand intersectionalism, which is always like the buzzword all the time, especially for me on the internet, because as soon as I start yapping about what it feels like to be a woman, somebody that I share like a race or ethnicity group with who is not a woman will start yelling at me because they don't understand what I'm talking about. Or as soon as I start talking about what it's like to exist as myself within my racial or ethnicity group, somebody from my gender group will start yelling at me about that. And the same thing about sexuality and nationality. And where, like, people have a lot of ideas and expectations for other people based on how they relate to the world, based on their own identities. People genuinely believe that identities shape behavior and not behavior shaping identities. To be honest, it's why a lot of people struggle with the idea of like zodiac signs. Like, a lot of people don't study astrology on the level to understand that astrology is a timekeeping system, and the 12 zodiacs are just like the division of the night sky. It's like it's like 12 halves and like all these other things, long story short. And so people decide that like Libra means I behave like this, and they don't understand that like behaving like this is what's defining Libra. And so it's not just a zodiac thing. People do the same thing. Well, I'm a woman and I believe women are supposed to behave like this, or I'm a southerner and I believe so, you know what I mean, and so on and so forth. And because people have their self-esteem, really their ideal of self and what makes them feel a part of something bigger than themselves, what makes them feel important, like they matter, like they have a reason to wake up every day, like a reason to survive and go out in this world and deal with heartbreaking things, and just the courage to face the world. Their identities give them the courage to face the world. And so when they come across somebody that they believe should be behaving in a certain way based on their identity or their own relationship to that other person's identity, it feels like they are personally being attacked. And so they become the aggressor. They start exhibiting what we would call phobia or isms. An example of it happening within like a same group. And so like, let's talk about transphobia for a sec. So they go, okay, well, I was born as a member of the X, Y, and Z identity. I don't know if I can say the S word, but you know what I mean, like biological identity. And I identify that with that same, the gender that is commonly associated with that born identity, and you don't. And so now I feel really triggered because I feel threatened by the idea that somebody could identify differently than they were born, because that's what you do. I was told that's what we would do. And so like people start bumping up against this ideal all of a sudden that they can think for themselves. And it sounds funny to say, but it's so true. It's like people go all their lives taking in information, and it's very innocent because as a child they have a right to be able to trust the adults in their lives that are leading them. But it's just like kind of the blind leading the blind, because it's been going on for generations. So they're like, everyone I trusted, everyone I loved told me this is just how the world is. It's not always that they secretly want to identify the same way you do. It's just that they can connect the dots. All of a sudden they're like, oh, I could have been making choices for myself. Like, if you can identify differently than what you were assigned at birth, then maybe I could have gone to college, even though women in my town or in my family never go to college, because that's just what we do. Like, you're supposed to do what society has assigned you to do. And when you trigger that in a person, it threatens to destabilize everything they believe about life. And instead of unraveling and going through this, what is it called? This night of the soul, and having to dismantle their whole lives and They don't want to do that. Most people don't want to do that. That's as a person who has willfully done that on purpose just to get to my truth and my authentic self, that's painful, that's difficult. It's the hardest thing anybody will ever choose to do. And so instead of doing that, they're just going to attack you. And so, which kind of brings us back to like, it's rarely about them actually hating whoever they're attacking. It's about hating the ideal of choice, hating the idea that people can exist outside of boxes. And we also see it within sharing groups. So that's an example. It's like a person who is not attacking another person or having a phobia because they share something. It's like, I'm assigning identity ideas to you based on a bigger shared group, or the fact that we're different. You're supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that. But we also have it within the same shared groups. A really common example, which a lot of people struggle with because they think that people who share this specific example online, they will actually use this as an excuse to behave poorly with the people who did this to them. And so both is wrong. But a good example that I'm going to use as an African American person, a Black person, is that growing up, they be like, Black people don't listen to rock music, you're a loser, or you're not Black enough, right? So this idea that me and that person are both Black tells them that Black behavior has to be a monolith. It has to exist in a certain way. Like, this is what Blackness looks like. And again, it's not really necessarily to control all Black people, but it all comes down from this idea biologically that to exist within a group or community, you have to have some kind of homogenous behavior that identifies the group as this is us and that is them, and being us and not them helps us to stay safe. And so it's happening on a biological level, on a psychological level, and so it's encoded, and then it's reinforced in society today because the government and all the powers that be, and really not even just the government, the people who market products to you, they need you in your shiny little boxes so that they can market to you very specifically. They want to be able to go, oh, you're a millennial, you're Black and a woman, and so I can push you this product. They don't want to have to think about that Black millennial women can be diverse, because then they can't push you all the same product. So some of it is the government, but a lot of it is the fact that big corporations want to sell you things easily. And so to be able to sell you stuff, they need to understand what your interests are, who you are psychologically, what your values are. And so the harder it is to put a finger on what your values are, the more angry and difficult it gets for the corporations. So anyways, and so like, it's rarely that like anybody really wants Black to be a monolith. It's just like, that's how it is. And so like, all of a sudden, if a person grows up believing that Black people only like hip hop, and all of a sudden they meet a Black person that unapologetically likes rock music, same thing. It's like, I could have just been liking bluegrass this whole time. I could have just not worn the Nikes or whatever the stereotypes are. Like, the people who buy into the things that are like, this is culture, because they don't understand the difference in between culture and personality. Culture can define personality, it can influence personality, but culture and personality do not have to be synonymous, right? Like, you can be who you are and still have a cultural background in something and participate in that, and that not be the only thing that you are, let's say. It also happens within disparity of, let's say, one person belongs to a racial group, let's say they're white, and another person belongs to a different racial group. Let's say that they are, we'll say Black again. I'll use myself. I don't want to use examples that might offend people. But it could be something so simple. They could share an economical level. They can share an economic group. They can share a socioeconomic group, an educational level, all of that. But let's say the white person believes that within society, what is normal and what is staying in the box is Black people aren't supposed to speak over white people, or Black people aren't supposed to be in positions of authority. And they don't think about it in terms of like, oh, Black people are inferior. They don't think of it as I hate Black people, but they have been socialized to believe through what they've seen in the world, just like there is a hierarchy, and typically in this hierarchy, due to what they don't perceive as systematic oppression, but it is, so like they don't know that there's a systematic reason for it, but they just know the way that things typically work is that white people are in positions of authority, and so they're not knowing that it comes from all this stuff. And so that's just how they see it, like white people are in charge. And so then they enter a conversation with a black person, or say me, and they go, and I exert an opinion that is my own, and I refute what they've said, and I say, well, I hear you, but I don't believe you, and I'm going to walk away from this with my own ideas. And they're upset and they're mad because this is triggered, this is pushed up against their ideal of what the world is supposed to be. And so then they might exhibit some behavior that we can perceive as racism, because they're like, that's not your place, and that's not what you do, and like, black people don't do this. And the whole time you can't tell them that it's racist, because to them it's not about the color of your skin, it's about the flow of the world. And the same thing is a hierarchy. Like, I've been in positions where white men have never ever had to answer to a black woman. They've never had to do it, and so they don't understand why it's happening now. Like, did this person skip? Did they sleep their way to the top? What has happened? Or what privileges did they overlook? Because they're used to being more privileged. And that's not to say there's an excuse for this behavior. It doesn't mean it's okay that people do hateful things, say hateful things, create problems for others based on this finite ideal of what the world is. It's not okay. But I do want us to move away from it's just hate for the sake of hate, because the more we allow that to be the sole focus, like, we're not going to get a solution. We're not going to figure out how to have conversations about it in a meaningful way. And that's important to note, because I kind of liken it to crime. I always say there's crime that's going to exist just because there's people who want to commit crime. There's definitely 100% that's just what they do. It's fun. It's just what they want to do. But I also always say, being from a hometown where the crime rate is high, there's so many people in this world that would not commit crime if they could just afford to be alive. Like, there are so many people that if money was an issue, they would not commit crime. If they could live in a different area, they would not commit crime. You know what I mean? So it's like, again, it doesn't mean it's okay, but it's like, when you realize that something can be prevented and it's bad, and so we can fix it by understanding where it's coming from, we need to take a second to understand where it's coming from. There are people who would not be hateful and phobic and ismistic if we could communicate with them in a way that allows them to see that what they believed about the world previously, or that they still believe about the world, is not true, and they don't have to limit themselves in the same way. And I think that is why a lot of my content resonates with people, because people who are open to it, they get it. It clicks for them. It's not just me telling my story. They get it like, oh, Kady escaped a box. And if Kady can escape a box, I can escape a box, which is 100% the correct way to interpret the things I talk about. It's not about Kady being so great and so better and above and so lucky. It's about Kady just decided to wonder what was possible. And it's not your job to stop me and convince me to not wonder what's possible. It's your job to apply that to your own life, okay? When I say all the things about do your own work, that is what I mean. I mean, I can't come fix it for you personally, because I'm imperfect and I'm still figuring it out. But I'm saying is, I would like to inspire you to understand that even if your situation is not the same as mine, it's similar. And we all struggle, we all have things. And if we can just open our mind to what can be more than what has been established, so much could change. But again, it's painful, and it makes people realize they've wasted time. But it's like, it's gonna keep wasting if you don't do anything. So let's do something about it. You know what I mean? And so it's like, instead of attacking people, which is hard not to. I get into tussles all the time with people on Instagram, but it's my little treat, you know what I mean? Like, on any given day, I got hundreds of people leaving crazy stuff, and it's like, I'm not really trying to be level-headed and educate and reform you after you attack me. I'm just gonna dig my heels in and poke you deeper in the place that I know it hurts, because you wouldn't be attacking me, a stranger on the internet, if it didn't hurt. You're hurting. You saw something in me that triggered the idea that life could be different, and you are so in so much pain from living in this box. And so I'm gonna poke even harder, because that's the only joy I can get some days. And it's not right, it's not equitable, and it's not healing anything. But some days I just want to, okay? Other days I just don't read, I don't scroll through the comments. But if we can offer people a little grace sometimes in our day-to-day dealing. So if you're not dealing with hundreds of these people paddling on you every day, I think it might be a little easier to be like, yo, let's not think about the fact that this person is trans or gay or black or whatever it might be. Let's think about it in terms of, you don't have to believe what society wants you to believe is possible for you and yourself. You have the power to define yourself. You will have to deal with the consequences of people not understanding it, people rejecting you, people not being on your wave. Relationships will change. I talk about this a lot when I'm speaking with men about how to be more emotionally intelligent. It does not mean that the very next time you try to tell your girlfriend how you feel, she's gonna be open to it. And it doesn't mean that if she's open to it, she's gonna change her mind or whatever. I remember I was talking to a guy and I was like, you should tell people up front that you just want casual stuff. And they're like, well, she might not sleep with me. Yeah, telling people the truth doesn't mean you automatically get what you want, baby. But it does mean that you can behave more ethically and you can feel understood, and you can avoid these situations that genuinely make you feel horrible, because you don't like feeling like the bad guy. You just don't like not getting what you want. But you can create a scenario where you just practice becoming more immune to rejection and living in honesty and authenticity, which is its own reward. Please hear me. Like, it hurts to be rejected, but it feels so good just to be who you are. And then eventually you are set up for a better scenario when the right thing comes along. Freeing yourself from the box is not about popularity. Freeing yourself from the box is not about popularity. It's about peace of mind. It's about joy. It's about the happiness that you could have, which is really like the lesson. It's like, when I see people doing stuff that triggers me, I take a moment and I go, am I triggered because they are threatening to give me a state of mind that's regressive, like they're going to trigger me into thinking that I might deserve less? Or are they triggering me because they are making me think that I deserve more and I have been giving myself such a disservice? And so that's the question we should ask. But yeah, that's the video today. If you like that, like and subscribe. I'd like to hear your commentary, your feedback below, of course. But thank you for watching. But definitely but definitely subscribe if you like having these types of conversations on this channel. I'm a musician, I'm a writer, but I also just like talking about life and pop culture and fun things. So it's a variety channel, which it might be a mistake, but here we are. And I hope you just kind of like having a little chit chat with me, and that you stick around for more conversations. But thanks for checking me out. I'll see you again soon.
I used to wear Stockholm, now I prefer alone. I'd rather do this on my own than be disrespected and feel so neglected.